Uncertainty is an area in which we have particular expertise to help clients. We go back to the basics. What is your product? What are the risks that it's posing to you? What are the risks that it might be posing to the consumer or to the overall marketplace? What obligations do you know you have? What obligations might you have in the near to midterm future? And how are you controlling against those? If you want to control against every possible risk, you can just not do any business. But we help companies decide and assess and do gap analyses and enhancement recommendations of what they're trying to achieve and how they can achieve it in the face of uncertainty.
What were the biggest challenges while working at the CFTC?
Coming into the CFTC in about 2019 from Coinbase, what I realized is that my team of 100, and indeed the whole agency of 700 or so people, didn't have as full of a grasp of some of these innovative markets and market structures as they might need in the future. So behind the scenes, Jason Samansato, Dan Gorfine, and others, and I taught a number of classes on the basics of these a couple of these new industries. And now we're ready, if directed by Congress, to regulate the spot markets if needed or if asked. The second area that was challenging was the prediction markets. During my tenure, we designated Kalshi and then dealt with the no action letter prior to it being withdrawn after my time, predicted and designated Kalshi. And the self-certification of those contracts were a real challenge to a part of my team that included products. The products team had to make sure that they were not readily susceptible to manipulation. They fit all the criteria. They were being self-certified rather quickly. And it really took up a disproportionate amount of our resources as we tried one by one to make sure we knew and understood fully what was being listed in prediction markets, and to also make sure that they complied with those core principles.
What is the mission of Tölt Strategies?
We provide expert advice to innovative industries. That can be blockchain, it can be traditional trading in markets, it can be trading markets of anything and everything, and other industries as well. The goal that I wanted to pursue in establishing Tölt Strategies is to have a relatively small organization with senior people that is flat in structure, so that we can come in, help organizations in new industries where there may not be full regulatory clarity, understand how they can manage and reduce their risks, and how they can plan for scaling in the future. Sometimes new innovative companies are very small. They may not yet have products to market, but they may be thinking about them and working feverishly to establish them and to bring them to one market and expand those perhaps globally. Establishing a product program and a compliance program that is not only reliable and appropriate, but is also really scalable and demonstrable is a particular skill set. At Coinbase, we did that in establishing the custodial solution, and it went through the hypergrowth phase, and its product controls and other matters went with it and was able to scale. They were able to acquire, et cetera. So it's that type of thinking of helping innovators innovate responsibly, helping them think of their risk in each stage of a very quickly changing kind of business arc and environment, and helping them understand how to comply with things like principles, which the CFTC is expert at and will probably apply to the next round of crypto regulation.
How do you specifically help these companies?
The first thing we do is we try to really understand what the mandate is and what the need is. Most of the time, that need and mandate comes from the client, who will say, I want to build this product, or I want to enter these markets, or I want to register in this way and be compliant. Or I want to set up a very scalable infrastructure that will stand the test of scrutiny in case we get regulated. There are lots of different things like that. And having advised companies in both regulated and non-regulated spaces, mostly financial regulation, however, I can take examples and best practices from those areas. But the second way that business can come in is where a company may be facing regulatory scrutiny, and they might want to come and have someone independent validate the remediation they've done. Maybe they've were non or less than compliant and they wanted to shift into a much more compliant space, they can either ask me to help them, or they can ask me and my team to come in and validate that they've done it appropriately and effectively and implemented those changes. I did want to take just a moment to mention in your response to your question something Commissioner Summer Mersinger said last month at a speech in front of ISDA. She was talking about rethinking enforcement, and she went through a number of different ways that the enforcement division and the commissioners can think about enforcement differently. Less about statistics and fines and more about where is the real risk and how do we go from less compliant to more compliant and how do we reward that. And I thought it was important that she said where a company has identified the problem, disclosed it with the CFTC staff, analyzed the situation, provided a report of its findings to CFTC staff, and engaged in steps to address the problem, it has essentially performed many of the CFTC's functions. And such cooperation and remediation often come at a significant expense, which may include hiring an independent compliance consultant or monitor to investigate the company's practices and procedures, recommend improvements, and to ensure that remediation is completed. That describes exactly what we do as a service, and I'm glad to hear Commissioner Mersinger understand the value of that. And in turn, she suggests that companies should be rewarded for that activity in terms of fines and other types of penalties that have up to now been relatively high and unrewarded.
How important are independent compliance consultants and monitors?
About a little over a year ago, Enforcement Director at the CFTC, Ian McGinley, gave a speech in which he said he was going to use independent compliance consultants and monitors more frequently. A monitor is approved by the government, reports to the government, is paid for by the company. It's very invasive. And it basically ensures that a company fulfills all the obligations that it committed to in settling and resolving an enforcement action. Independent compliance consultant is a much lighter version of that, but it's still independent and advises the company on how to any gaps and how to improve and make sure that they fulfill those commitments. Both of those are invasive, but when a company is faced with the risks and the benefits of those options, they really want to choose an independent compliance consultant or monitor who can focus on what's committed to in the enforcement decision, scope discipline, cost discipline, where possible, utilize the resources of the organization itself. An organization like Tölt Strategies is not a deep layered organization. It really brings in expert principals that can work with the organization to ensure and validate that those commitments made to enforcement have been completed, make any suggestions around doing so, and then report to the government where required that hopefully it's been completed and the company can continue on and do business.
How does your mix of private and public sector employees help Tölt Strategies?
I think it helps enhance the effectiveness just by keeping the eye on the ball. We are lean, curated teams of senior experts. We have access to as deep a bench as we need, but we don't need to employ dozens or hundreds of folks at different levels below, the key team leads. Our goal is to come in, understand the mandate and the scope, get the job done well, effectively, efficiently, and within discipline of scope and cost, and make sure that we fulfill the commitment and the client has where that's the goal. And then to get out so that the company can focus its resources on pursuing its business models and products and expansions. And I think that structure, where we convene and curate a team of experts, can really be beneficial in helping companies get from here to there effectively and efficiently.
What trends do you see in regulation?
Today is the 18th of November. Things change minute by minute. And so I do see significant changes in technology, but also obviously changes in the political environment. Focusing for just a moment, I think there will be fairly meaningful changes in our in the regulatory environment, probably more so at the SEC than in the CFTC, which has always been disclosure and principles based, something the Republicans really like. But I do think there will be meaningful changes in the overall landscape with the Republicans having control of the Congress and President Trump having been elected. The blockchain industry is very excited about the opportunities to hopefully innovate responsibly and to register, and they're asking for regulatory oversight. In terms of technologies, obviously there's AI and a huge focus on data integrity and the source of data. Sometimes when a Democratic administration switches over to a Republican administration, you might have a lesser focus on certain areas. I personally think that areas like AI, blockchain, and data will not get a lesser focus. Let's just take data, for example. You might have conservatives say there should be a little bit less reporting, or it should be more pragmatic or less onerous. I don't disagree with many of those things. That said, the more appropriate and clean data reporting is, the more efficient the government can run. No party wants there to be financial instability, and Dodd-Frank was passed so that the FSOC can oversee our financial markets and our stability. And areas like data integrity, I believe, will continue to be of great focus. Also of great focus will be things like fraud, disclosures, like you've been using AI and not telling people. Lots of those areas will be ripe for focus as well as technology develops at a lightning speed.